Life Study of Matthew, Message 1, The King's Antecedents and Status. A word of introduction. The Bible is God speaking. It has two sections. In the first section, the Old Testament, God spoke by the prophets, and in the second section, the New Testament, He spoke in the Son, in the person of the Son. This section is composed of the four Gospels, the book of Acts, the Epistles, and the book of Revelation. While he was in the flesh, the Son began to speak in the four Gospels. After his resurrection, he continued to speak as the Spirit through the apostles. Thus, the New Testament is just the Son speaking to us. He's ministering himself as life and everything that we may become his body, his expression, the church. The Bible is a book of life. The life is nothing less than the living person of Christ. In the Old Testament, Christ is portrayed as the coming one. In the New Testament, the one whose coming was predicted has come. Thus, the New Testament is the fulfillment of the Old. St. Augustine once said that the New Testament is contained in the Old, and the Old Testament is expressed in the New. These two testaments are actually one, revealing one person who is our life. The opening word of the New Testament. Nearly all Christians are bothered by the first page of the New Testament. It has many names that are difficult to pronounce, but this page is the first part of the New Testament. In any kind of writing, both the opening word and the closing word are important. When many Christians come to the New Testament, they skip over the first part of chapter 1 of Matthew and start reading at verse 18. It seems that in their New Testament, there's no such paragraph as Matthew chapter 1 verse 1 to 17. But thank God for the rich portion of the word. The genealogy of Christ is an extract of the whole Old Testament. It includes everything except the first 10.5 chapters of Genesis. If we would know the meaning of this genealogy, we need to know the entire Old Testament. A living picture of Christ. We need to say a word concerning the New Testament. The New Testament is simply a living picture of a person. This person is too wonderful. He is both God and man. He is the mingling of God with man. For in him the divine nature and the human nature are mingled together. He is the king, and he is a bond slave. He is wonderful. No human being has ever spoken words like he spoke, words so profound yet so clear. For example, Jesus said, I am the bread of life, and I am the light of the world. Plato and Confucius were two great philosophers, and people appreciated the things they said. But neither of them could say, I am the light of the world. No one else could say, I am the life, or I am the way, or I am the reality. These are simple words and short sentences. I am. I am what I am. And I am that I am. But they are great and profound. Can any of us say that we are the light of the world or that we are the life? If we did, we would surely be sent to a mental hospital. But Jesus could say these things. How great he is. 4 biographies of one person. Jesus is all-inclusive. With him there are many aspects. No one can exhaust in language who and what he is. Who else in history has 4 unique biographies written of him? Although the New Testament is a short book, it begins with 4 biographies of one person. 4 books telling us of the life of Christ. Each of us has 4 sides, the front and the back, the right and the left. If you look at me from the front, you can see 7 holes on my face. But if I turn my back to you, all the holes disappear. On my right side, you can see a little hole, and on my left side another little hole. If you would make an accurate copy of my image, you need to take a picture of every side. This is exactly what has been done in the New Testament. Why do we have 4 Gospels? Because Christ has at least 4 main aspects. Christ is great because he is all-inclusive and unsearchably rich. He needs several biographies. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John present different aspects of Christ because each writer was a different kind of person. Matthew, for instance, was a tax collector. Among the Jewish people in ancient times, a tax collector was a despised person. Nevertheless, Matthew wrote the first biography of Christ. Mark was an ordinary man, and Luke was a physician and a Gentile. At first, John was a common fisherman, but eventually he became the very experienced apostle. Each wrote a different biography about the same Christ. This living person needs many biographies. The expansion of Christ. The book of Acts is the expansion of this wonderful person. It is the branching out of the all-inclusive Christ. This Christ had expanded from one person to thousands and thousands of persons. He was once the individual Christ, but in Acts he has become a corporate Christ. Following the Acts, we have all the epistles, which give a full definition of this wonderful, universal great man. Christ is the head, and the church is the body. This is the universal man, Christ and the church. Finally, we have the book of Revelation as a consummation of the New Testament. This book gives us a full picture of the body Christ, the individual Christ incorporated with all his members to become the New Jerusalem. The order of the 4 Gospels. Let us return to the 4 Gospels. If I were to arrange the 4 Gospels, I would put the Gospel of John first. When reading the Bible, many Christians start with John and then proceed to read Luke, Mark, and Matthew. The human concept is the exact opposite of the divine. The divine concept starts with Matthew and proceeds through John. The human thought starts with John and goes back to Matthew. Many of us would begin reading the New Testament with John because John is so wonderful. It is a book of life. After John, we would read Luke because Luke is a book of the Savior, telling us of many cases of salvation. Then, of course, we would come to Mark because Mark is short and simple. People read Matthew last because Matthew is too difficult, too mysterious. Not only is chapter 1 difficult to understand, the parables in chapter 13 and the prophecies in chapter 24 and chapters 25 are also difficult. Chapters 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount, are especially difficult. No one can practice it. You strike me on the right cheek and I turn to you the left. You force me to walk 1 mile and I walk 2 miles. You take my outer garment and I give you my inner garment. This is too much. Only Jesus can do it. Thus, many place Matthew last. John is dear and precious. In John, Jesus is everything, and we do not need to do anything. Hence, we like John, but not Matthew. We may not say this in plain words, but we have such a feeling in our heart. Nevertheless, the divine order is best. God put Matthew first.